the Department of Justice came to Louisville, and they gave the results of a study that they had done. And some called it a scathing report. But out of that report, the city, the police department, and the DOJ agreed to negotiate a consent decree. They've been working, I believe the rough draft came in February of this year. There's been about 60 different meetings about the negotiation points. In July of this year, the mayor said in the interview, we hope to have it signed by the fall. He was asked again on November 12th after their election, and they asked him, will this agreement be signed before the next administration comes into office? And the reason why that matters is the Trump administration does not like consent decrees. And so the thought process is if we don't sign it, they're not going to enforce it. And so there was a rally held on November 26th that had community leaders, that had council members, where they called on the mayor to sign the consent decree before the inauguration. On this past Tuesday, the Courier-Journal wrote an article where they talked about it's looking kind of shaky as to whether or not it's going to get signed. So I have a two-part question for you. The first part of the question is this: will the consent decree be signed before the inauguration? That's the first question. The second part is this: if it is not signed and it ends up being shelved, some people in the community will feel betrayed by that. And so one of your big things I've heard you talk about constantly is community engagement and community relationships. In order to have that, there has to be trust. But if the city intentionally doesn't sign this consent decree, how can there be trust? And how will you speak to that? So the first question is, will it be signed? The second question is, if it's not, what are you going to do?
So just a point of clarification on the kind of the process. The Department of Justice actually came into town in 2021 to begin their investigation. And so that was actually my job. That's what I have worked on for the past 3 years. And so all of the reform efforts, the Accountability and Improvement Bureau, and all of the stuff that's been created in the last 3.5, 4 years related to police reform, all of our audit systems, our performance reviews, that was all what I created. So regardless of what the Department of Justice wants, thinks, sees, believes, LMPD and this administration is dedicated to police reform and improvement. So I really, one way or the other, I don't care if we get a consent decree or not, we're on the same path either way. And I am 100% promising you we are going to get this done the right way, regardless of whether we have a consent decree or not. That being said, the negotiations have never stopped. I think, you take the mayor's statements, that my statements have been very similar. If you would have asked me back in March whether or not we'd have a consent decree by this point, I would have told you we had it months ago. But I will say that we did a lot of work to study consent decrees. There are a lot of problems with consent decrees, tons of problems with consent decrees. And what we did was we wanted to make sure we had some principles that made sure that those issues that other cities have run into with consent decrees, between cost, between increased crime, administrative issues, no clear path to success, that those were all addressed. And so in this time, negotiations have not stopped. Whenever we get to that point where we say, all right, this is actually going to serve the city in the way that it should, we will sign a consent decree. But what we're not going to do is what happened in Baltimore, which was, they had the exact same thing happen, is that in between the time that Trump came in or got elected and he came into office, they rushed and signed a consent decree that both the city, the police department, and the Department of Justice all said was a mistake. We are not going to do that. Whatever agreement we have with the Department of Justice is going to be the right agreement for Louisville.
Okay, I'm going to be good. But my follow-up question.
Say it.
My follow-up question, the whole point.
I'm not trying to dodge your question.
Well, no, but the whole point of a consent decree is it is a legal document that requires an independent monitor to make sure that all the steps are followed and all the improvement is done, because from the statement of the Department of Justice, the constitutional rights of citizens in Louisville were violated, especially black people. So that's why it's of importance to us. So I hear what you're saying, but if we don't get the consent decree, there's not going to be any oversight. We have to take your word that you're going to get it fixed. So for us, for a lot of people, to intentionally not sign it sends a really bad message to people who are directly affected by what the DOJ said.
No, 100%. And I understand that people would look at that way. So we're saying intentionally not sign it. I don't think any of you are going to sign a contract that you think is a bad contract that's not going to accomplish what you say it's going to accomplish. And so that's the problem. I think it would be a disservice to the community, particularly the black community, if we signed a contract that wasn't going to get the job done. Regardless of what kind of oversight it is, if it's not functional, it's not a good agreement. So we have to make an agreement that is functional. And at the point, if I ask the Department of Justice, where has this worked? Who can I go to as the example? And they don't say anybody?
New Orleans.
Then I've got a problem. No,
New
hold on,
Orleans.
whoa, hold on. I'm telling you the conversations that I've had.
I know.
When I say, who can I go to and model myself off of, and they don't give me an answer, how am I supposed to say that worked? When I'm not saying, look.
But
if
New
you
Orleans, though, we can.
Hey, bear with me. Bear
Okay.
with me. Change and improvement is about leadership. 100%. When you look at every city at the point that, under a consent decree, every city at the point where they began to have success, it was because of a change in leadership. The consent decree is a very good guidepost, but it doesn't matter what the consent decree says if you don't have leadership and that's going to get people to buy into it, right? So this is about leadership. And I feel that we have a command staff and administration in place that when we get this done and the external oversight is there, that external oversight is going to say, oh, y'all are doing this the right way. This is actually what consent decrees should have looked like for the last 30 years. And this is the model for consent decrees going forward. I refuse to do the same thing that I've seen fail over and over again. If you're telling me that police reform in New Orleans are still under their consent decree,
They are.
almost 9 years later?
Yes.
10 years later? If it takes us 12 years to accomplish compliance with a consent decree, we have failed you. We have failed. It should not take that long. We should be able to get this right and get it right now. And that is not the route that a consent decree has traditionally taken. And so my goal is that we have a consent decree that has a clear path for us to achieve success while I'm still here. The average consent decree goes through 3 mayors and 4 police chiefs. Do y'all want another 4 police chiefs in the next 5 years? No. And the thing is that changeovers of administration is another hindrance in accomplishing the task, because you get inconsistency, different levels of dedication. Like I said, I've spent my last 3 years 100% dedicated to police reform. My plan is not to go anywhere. We are going to get this done. We are going to have external oversight. That is my promise to you. And if it's not done in the way that you want it, I expect all of you are going to say something. And I'm going to be out of here on the rails.
One last question. If the external oversight does not come from the Department of Justice, where will it come from?
Well, we're going to have independent oversight.
What will that look like, though?
We're still in negotiations right now.
Okay.
So for me to say that we're going to do something different from have a consent decree is jumping ahead, right? We are going to negotiate until we either have a consent decree or negotiations fall apart, and we go in another direction to have a promise to the city of how this is going to look.
Okay. All right, thank you. You can lean back now.
No, hey, I get excited about this because the thing is that people don't.
They got down on me like this, y'all. I got a little worried. They tensed up over here. I was like, who's going to be my backup?
In all honesty, though, I am dedicated to this. And that's the thing is that I think people think a piece of paper accomplishes something.
Right.
It's people that do work. We in a church now.
But
You can read the Bible and it don't mean nothing until you put it into action.
But here's I think what the issue is, and I don't want to stay here. This is the last thing because really there's other things I want you to speak on. It's the process. I think people are concerned about the process. And for a lot of people, and we're going to talk about this in a moment, perception is reality. And the mayor's office and the police department can do a better job explaining what you just explained, because that hasn't been explained this way to most people. So I think communication is a really big piece of it. When we talk about your crime plan, that's one of the things you want to talk about is town hall. So we appreciate you taking this moment to do that. So let's move forward. I do have a question for you. And it goes to what we were just talking about. How do you intend to change the way citizens view the police department?
Well, that's a couple of ways. Is one, you see, we did put out that crime plan to explain to you how and why we make decisions around our enforcement actions. A lot of it is this. I think you all have seen me or people out of the command staff probably more than, particularly, we're doing press conferences every other week. We're doing town halls all over the place. I am dedicated to trying to tell you how we are performing. We're going to do good. We're going to do bad. You never, I don't get insulted by being told I was wrong. I've been wrong all the time. You telling me I messed up, there's no reason for me to hide from my mistakes. We can't improve unless we talk about it, right? And so that's part of it. But I think what we've done traditionally is externally we talk about that, but then we don't act on it internally, which means the people here that are actually having the interactions, the officers every day, never have that modeled for them, which is how they turn around and go and treat the community. So if your boss is treating you one kind of way and then turns around and says, go treat other people differently, that's not how it works. So internal transparency is just as important. And that procedural justice internally has to be modeled at my level to those officers so they understand, you know what, when somebody questions you, it's okay. It's not a challenge. The other thing that we have to do is we have to create more opportunities for non-confrontational interactions, non-enforcement interactions, those everyday interactions with the people that live in the area that you work, so that we all see each other as regular people. Unfortunately, we're never going to change the nature of this job from the standpoint of our job is fundamentally to lock people up, right? We're never going to take the conflict out of that. But the opportunities to interact with everybody on a normal, regular interaction has to be there, and it has to be encouraged, and it has to be part of what we do.
Thank you. Next question. How do you intend to set clear standards and expectations for the officers you lead?
Well, that's every day. That's how you hold yourself. That's professionalism, that's culture, but there's also has to be systems that back that up, right? So we have instituted many systems. We have everybody thought, okay, well, body cameras are going to get instituted and that's going to be a thing. Well, unless you have a system for reviewing body cameras, it really doesn't matter, right? So we have a system for reviewing body cameras now to make sure that supervisors are reviewing body camera footage of their people, that we have an audit unit that is reviewing body cameras and scoring it based on how the officers performed, and then a feedback loop back to the officer so that we can improve performance. As far as discipline is concerned, having a clear discipline structure. One of the things that I did was just this inside baseball, but our Special Investigations Division used to be comprised of Public Integrity Unit, which investigated crimes that police officers are involved in, officer-involved shootings, things like that. They do all the criminal investigation, versus PSU, which does all the administrative, the policy investigations. They were under one house. I have split them to give each of those an independent division so that they have a separation and a more clear structure and supervision within each one of those so that those investigations are more closely managed, right? And then how we have a disciplinary matrix now that guides discipline so that I know you, I know your work ethic. Hey, don't do that again, versus I've never worked with you, we're going to hammer you, right? You have to have clear set expectations that apply equally to everybody, and that goes a long way.
Thank you. And again, I'm moving quickly because he's on a time crunch. Let's talk about crime rate in Louisville. Where are we now compared to this time last year, just in general?
So overall crime is down slightly, but the concerning things, our non-fatal shootings are down 9%, which is a pretty good success. The other thing is that our clearance rate, our arrest rate and clearance rate for non-fatal shootings in the last 2 years have gone up almost 600%, because we created a standalone unit just to investigate non-fatal shootings, whereas they used to be dumped off on regular detectives and managed with a regular caseload. So that has been a game changer. But our homicides are up a couple of percent. So we're sitting at, I think, 138 homicides year to date. And to put that in context, the record number of homicides for this city and county prior to 2020 was 117. Since 2020, we have not been under 150. 70% of those homicide victims are black. That's where we're at. That's why we have to have a formulated crime plan that everybody understands where resources need to be and what they're being asked to do.
All right. How does Louisville compare to other cities across the country as far as what you just talked about?
When it comes to homicide rate, we are way up there.
Okay.
We are one of the most dangerous cities for homicides right now.
What is it, D.C., Baltimore, Chicago?
Now, they're ahead of us in sheer numbers, but they're also larger than us. So, yes, but those cities are ahead of us. Per capita homicide rate, murders per 100,000, we're in the top 10.
Okay. But population size of the city isn't in the top 10 in the nation. Though we're what?
No, we're 26.
26?
Yeah.
But we're in the top 10 in homicides, right?
Homicide rate.
Homicide rate, okay.
Let's
talk.
Cities.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
For major cities.
For major cities. Let's talk about the perception of crime in the black community. There is a perception that crime is more pervasive in West Louisville and other majority black neighborhoods. Is this an accurate perception for people to have?
Yes. Look, we got to start telling the truth. I just said 70% of our homicide victims are black. Over 60% of our homicides occur in 3 divisions. There are primarily black divisions.
Can you name them for us? Let us know.
The 1st, 2nd, and 4th division. So
currently
we sit in Shavely, but this is right on the edge of the 2nd division, which is primarily the West End. You got the 1st division, which is Russell, Portland, downtown. And then the 4th division is everything south of Broadway all the way down to the Watterson Expressway area within the city. So yes, there is an absolute problem. And here's the thing: is that it frustrates me because people say we should police the same way in Lake Forest that we police in Park Hill. No, we shouldn't. No, we shouldn't. It is an absolute disservice to black people if we think that we should police everywhere the same way. We don't have the same problems everywhere. If I'm trying to write tickets for running stop signs on the Watterson Expressway, I'm an idiot. That is the wrong tactic for the wrong problem. So to expect that I'm going to police the same way in an area that has a ton of break-ins to houses and car thefts as Park Hill, where we have homicides and shootings, that's dumb. And it's a disservice to the people who live there. That being said, we have to do it the right way. And we still have to treat people the right way. And we have to be respectful of people. That's the difference. The tactic is not the problem. It's how you use the tactic. And it can be done the wrong way. And we know that. And we have done it the wrong way plenty of times. Right? So we do have to make officers aware that because our tactic might be different, or because the problem that we're addressing might be different, doesn't mean you treat people differently. And that's the big thing.
Thank you. Let's talk about perception of policing in the black community. There is a perception that some members of law enforcement have an us versus them mentality when approaching their job, rather than one of protecting and serving their fellow citizens. Just as we talked about false perceptions earlier when it comes to crime, Is this too a false perception that is held by some in the community?
No. It's incomplete, but it's not wrong. That is a very easy mindset to slip into. And it's regardless of where you're policing and race. But we know the history of policing is there's a lot of problems with some of the things that we've done over the past. That doesn't go away. And officers sometimes, you got to think, when the interactions that we have with people, this is why I said we need to create more opportunities for everyday interactions. The vast majority of interactions we have with people are on their worst day, at their worst moment. So when that's what you're interacting with on a day-to-day basis, you get compassion fatigue. You can't pour your heart out to everybody that you come into, or your tank's going to run dry real fast, right? And so we have to do a better job of taking care of officers and reminding officers that you are here to police for people, not police people. People should feel like they're being kept safe. That doesn't mean that you can't do the hard-nosed work of policing. This is a dirty job sometimes. We get in fights and foot chases. We're chasing people in dark alleys and jumping fences and stuff like that. We're going to do that stuff, but we're going to do it the right way, and we're going to try to change that perception. I don't like this concept of we need to rebuild trust. That's false. Trust never was here. And so we've got to stop talking about how things used to be to rebuild trust. If you look at the history of trust polling and policing, going back to when they first started back in the 60s, there's always been somewhere between a 12 and 25% gap between white people and black people's trust of the police. And it has stayed that way the entire time. So this concept of rebuilding trust is a false concept. It's like saying a consent decree is going to solve a problem.
So that's right? What we're going to do.
So what we have to do is we have to change our paradigm about what we're actually trying to accomplish.
Let me rewrite some of these questions. I see we ain't gonna be friends today, huh? All right. Well, let me ask you this, brother man. No, I do have another question for you.
All I'm saying is where we're trying to get is the same place.
Yes.
I think we have to stop lying to ourselves about where we've been.
Yeah. Another question. How do we address the conscious or unconscious bias that has a tendency to creep into policing activities when black people or marginalized people are involved?
Yeah, that's again, those everyday interactions that we have. We have to increase those because we know that distance increases those biases. Here's the thing is the other thing we also, again, have to change kind of the paradigm around the conversation. Because I tell you what, you tell a white person they're racist, you're never going to get across to them. It's not going to happen. Have you ever been called out of your name and then had somebody try to teach you something? You ain't going to learn nothing from them. So the conversation has to change. Bias is not a bad thing. It is normal. Not recognizing it and not trying to prevent acting on it is the bad thing. We all have biases. White people think the same thing about black people that black people think about black people, and vice versa. Right? We all have stereotypes and biases. We just have to talk about it as it is. Stop making it this value statement, because here's the thing: is a lot of people get frustrated with these white officers that go to the West End and say, "Hey, we don't have officers who live." This is the group of people that is volunteering to go outside of their neighborhood in order to help protect people that they don't know, don't live around. And people are saying they're racist for doing it. Are there some that are? 100%. Does sometimes the environment and the culture not help with that? 100%. But I've never been chastised into improvement. When you give people a high standard and a high goal, they're much more likely to achieve it as opposed to constantly talking about how horrible they are. And so that's where I'm trying to go, is I'm trying to appeal to the good nature, the service nature, the hardworking nature of officers who are doing this work, as opposed to beating them down. I mean, you're never going to beat people into submission in these types of conversations. Mm-hmm. And so making it a learning and educational interaction, I think, is the approach that we have to start taking.
Thank you. What role do citizens and other non-police organizations in Louisville have to play in creating such an environment where we can get things done? What can we do?
Talk to us. We need interaction. We need ideas. We need creativity. We need cooperation. It's simple to say, you see something, say something, call with tips, call 911. But you have to trust that we're going to do our job the right way and do it in a competent way. But officers also, just as much as I need to encourage officers to talk to citizens and have regular interactions, I need citizens to be willing to do the same thing. Talk to officers. Ask legitimate questions about our jobs. I love explaining why we do what we do. And so talk to us. Talk to us. Ask us about different stuff. Tell us what your problems are. Help us help you solve problems. That's what we need. And you'll see on that crime plan, there's a QR code for feedback on just that.
And that's a good segue. What I have in my hand is a 2025 crime reduction strategic plan. The chief brought one-pagers with him, and he can give some of those out. If we need to make copies, I'm sure we can make copies. The full report is 20 pages. We're not going to go through all 20 pages. We don't have the time to do that. But there are a couple of things. I'm going to get you out on time. I see you looking at your watch. There are a couple of things that I do want to draw your attention to. LMPD is, and this is from the executive summary. We have some questions, yes. LMPD is allocated for 1,328 officers. Right now we're at 21% below that. We have 1,050 officers. What's your plan to get us up to full staffing?
Well, between the time that was written and today, we're at 1,038.
So we've gone down? Okay.
So here's the big thing is, one, I need two things. I need to encourage all of you all and all of the community to encourage people to do this job. But on the other end, what I have to do, the biggest recruiter is people who are already here. I have to make these officers be proud of their job again so that they're willing to go out and tell people to do this job. The profession's having this issue across the board. And so we have to make this a welcoming place to work. It is a hard job to do, not going to take away hard. I like difficult tasks. That's what makes it rewarding. But officers here have to enjoy their job and be proud of it.
Thank you. You alluded to this earlier. In the executive summary, it says in the last 10 years, from 2013 to 2023, homicides have progressively increased by 200%. In 2023, we had 49 homicides. In 2023, we had 147 homicides. And this strategic plan speaks to that. And the way that you plan to address it is by a three-front approach. Data responsive policing, violent offender enforcement, and sustained focus improvement. We're going to spend the majority of our time talking about the last one because that directly involves us. But can you explain what data responsive policing is and what violent offender enforcement is?
Yeah, so that data responsive policing, that is applicable to every single patrol division. And it's looking at what is going on now. We've got car break-ins happening here. We've got a spike in robberies over here. And the way that we used to do it is, okay, you're the major of the first division. You have this problem. What are you going to do about it? Show us some pictures and some arrests of what you did about it the next week. No, we're going to take a more comprehensive approach to it of how is LMPD as a whole going to work to solve that problem. So that is the short-term kind of responsive to trend plan. And then the violent offender approach is that we know that we have a small percentage of people that are responsible for the majority of violent crime. We have to get those people off the street. We have to arrest them. We have to make sure we focus the prosecutions on the most violent people. And then the other part of that is our group violence intervention is where I'm going after here to the U.S. Attorney's Office. And group violence intervention is a carrot and a stick approach. We're going to identify you as being part of group violence, that you're likely to be the next shooter or the next victim. We're going to help you and your family get out of this lifestyle. Job training, placement, education, all of the resources that we can give you. But know that you're on our radar, and if you don't get out of this lifestyle, you are a priority for arrest and prosecution, and we're going to make sure that you end up in jail until you can age out of those poor choices.
with the violent offender enforcement on page 9, I noticed this when I was reading through. It says this: offenders and groups are officially notified by law enforcement, prosecutors, clergy, and community members that they are aware of their actions and involvement in violence. Given that this is the Central District Baptist Association, what role do you see for clergy in the violent offender enforcement process?
Yeah, so we just had what we'd call it is a call-in. And so we bring these offenders in and we bring them in the same room with all of those resources at the same time. So prosecutors, Goodwill, several of our chaplains are there, and we offer all of those resources. So if you all want to help with that project of getting people out of the lifestyle as opposed to them coming to us and us having to deal with them, we identify those people and bring them to you. So you can reach out to me, you can reach out to Dr. O'Bannon, and we'll take all the help we can get with that project, because that is about getting people out of the lifestyle.
Okay. Thank you. The third point in the 3-point plan is sustained focused improvement. And the purpose of that is to address the concerns of chronic crime in our community. This strategy includes 5 key focuses: community, environment, patrol, investigations, and technology. It's the first point of that interests me. It talks about increased town halls, community meetings, which you are doing, faith leadership outreach, residential needs and risk assessments, food utility needs assessments. But then under environment, it really talks about if we want to make changes, we got to change the way people are living. We got to improve the community, more green space, getting rid of, abandoned vehicles, dealing with abandoned houses. And that's more long term. But can you talk more about that one?
Yeah, that's the part that I'm really excited about, and I've gotten more excited about it as we've started the project, because if you look, those are broken down into census tracts for the city is what it is. And so we've scored those based on the number of homicides, the number of non-fatal shootings, the number of gun crimes, the number of carjackings and robberies, right? And then it's a diminishing score over time. So a homicide that happened yesterday gets more points than a homicide that happened a year ago. If you look over the last 10 years, it's the same 15 locations over the last 15 years, kind of repeatedly with very small changes. So obviously what we're doing is not working. But our first meeting that we had with all of these other government entities, Metro Works, Ocean, Office of Safe and Helping Neighborhoods, parks, all of these people in the same room. And what we're doing is, so I come to your house. So our plan is we get officers out there talking to people on a normal basis. There's been an incident in your neighborhood maybe, and we're talking to you. Hey, I don't know anything about that shooting that happened over there, but I know that there's this boarded up house that the boards have been pulled off of, and we got people going in and out of there smoking dope. All right. The 311 app that we have on our phones, every police officer, everything that we put in there in those sustained focus improvement areas gets prioritized. So we can clean up that graffiti, we can clean up those abandoned properties, and now we start to sustain that improvement, not by us doing it, but we're often the first point of contact between people and a resource. So I'm not going to board a house, I'm not going to cut an abandoned lot, but I'm going to get it to the people that need to. And then there's an accountability measure that's built in on the backside of that, of we have regular meetings that says, all right, on this block, we had all of these things that needed to be done. What is the status of all of those? And then what is the effect it's had on these violent crime scores over time? So it really is about how we're changing neighborhoods in those places that attract crime and blight. And then the mayor has a larger crime plan that he's going to be coming out with. This is just part of it that builds on that and goes to a lot of the root causes of crime, education, housing, those types of things.
Okay, thank you. I want to go ahead because we're running short on time. I want to deal with the questions that came from the congregation. Here's the first question. When will the next Citizens Police Academy be conducted?
I don't have that exact date. We just graduated one. I will get you the date.
Okay, but there will be another one, though.
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
Thank you. How often do police officers get training?
So we are required by state law to have at least 40 hours minimum a year. We have changed the way that we do that a little bit. The average officer here is now getting somewhere between 65 and 80 hours of training a year. And we've changed it from doing one block of 40-hour training to getting smaller, more frequent blocks of training, so that if you look at educational models, that is a much better way to make sure that people actually learn the skills and the knowledge and retain it. We've actually created an academic unit within our training academy that's made up of several PhDs that are there to make sure that our training is quality.
Thank you. Since police are not able to be around all the time, when people are running red lights and stop signs, has there been any discussion with the other city departments to offer solutions to this problem?
Absolutely, 100%. A couple of things that we're doing is we're looking to partner and contract with a private entity to start picking up traffic accidents so that we can free up the manpower to be able to stop spending an hour and a half on a traffic accident report, have them do it so officers can go out and do that type of work. The other thing, and this is a state legislation thing, is traffic cameras and the automatic tickets from red light cameras that they have in a lot of other states. But we can't do that by state law, so we have to get some legislation changed to be able to do that. And that's the mayor's office is actually the ones who are working on that right now for us.
Okay. Thank you. Are there plans for a youth detention center in Louisville? If so, when? If not, why not?
Yes, there are. It's a state issue. We actually are not the ones that run that. I can't give you an exact date on when that is supposed to be ready.
Okay, thank you. One last question, then I'll let you have a closing statement, and then I'm going to do a closing statement to fix everything you said wrong. So let's just get that right. I'm going to be the last one with the mic today, because he was just dead wrong when he leaned up and going to jump me about the consent decrees. I'm just doing my job. Don't kill the messenger. So I've heard you speak about this before, and I believe you'll be willing to speak about this now. You've talked about, in other settings, your faith upbringing. And so my question to you is this. Can you share a little bit about that and then explain how your faith influences how you do your job?
So I grew up Catholic. I'm still Catholic. I was actually, for a while, a 6-day-a-week Catholic because, when we were growing up, there wasn't like the early school drop-off. And my parents went to work at 6 a.m., so we got dropped off at church. And we went to Mass before school, and that was our before school care. So I was going to church 6 days a week. And actually, in high school, I wanted to be a priest. But I like women, so.
For those who didn't hear it in the back, he said he liked women.
So I would prefer to have a wife and family. But the way I see faith, whatever your faith background is it's about your connection to other people and about some kind of guidance on how you treat people and interact and take care of people. I don't care what your job is. If you don't spend your focus and your talents on how you help other people, that's a problem, and that comes from my faith. And so a lot of the stuff that I've done in my personal life outside of this profession, it has to do with particularly surrounding education and the youth, because I really think that education is the answer to a lot of problems. This country does not lack opportunities. It lacks exposing people to the opportunities that are available to them. If it doesn't matter how many options there are out there for you, if you don't see them and are exposed to them and realize, and I think this is part of the problem with that I went to St. X, and I still didn't think a lot of those opportunities were available to me until I almost got out of St. X and I realized, you know what? It's not just white people who can live in nice neighborhoods or have comfort. Like, I didn't think that was for us. And it's exposure to opportunities and realizing that whatever lifestyle you want to live is for you. And there are people out there who are willing to help you achieve that. And I think that's what we miss out on is exposing people to the opportunities that are actually available to them.
Thank you. Can you introduce who came with you today, please?
Yeah, so this is Josh Hash. He's my adjutant. He does pretty much the yeoman's work of the chief's office. And he is a retired major from us, but he is a person that I trust. He's the one that I bump decisions off of. He tells me what to do and keeps me in line most of the time. So he is my right-hand man, and his word is mine. And then Dr. Teresa O'Bannon, who runs our chaplaincy, and she is part and parcel of our push for officer and employee wellness. If you haven't heard, we created the Summit Wellness Center, which is an absolute national model, and it is built around 5 pillars of health. It's social, emotional, physical, spiritual, and mental. And she is our spiritual health guidance. And we felt that was important to have that in-house, full-time, where people can reach out and access that. And she does all kinds of God's work, not just for us, but for the community as well. She goes out on shooting scenes and things like this to help be that crutch that often isn't there in that time.
One last thing I want to ask of you. We have our annual session every summer. We would love for you to come back and do this exact same thing so we can continue the conversation. I know we have opportunities to see you in other venues, but we think it's important that we keep this dialogue open where you can come in and give us updates on how things are progressing, how the crime plan is rolling out. So we would appreciate it if you could come back and visit with us next summer.
Yes, sir. I love. Reach out to me anytime. Let me know opportunities. I enjoy this. You saw me get excited about the consent decree stuff. Like, I enjoy.
He wasn't excited. He fired up. He leaned up like, no, bro, I'm getting ready to smack you. I got nervous. Hey, I left my stuff at home too. So I'm like, look out, man.
Look, I love this job. I love explaining to people what we do and why we do it. And here's the thing is that I hope you see the passion that I have for this job. I don't expect for you to agree with every decision that I make. And I expect for you to say something when you disagree. Because like I said, I'm not afraid to be wrong. And the only way that I can get better is if you explain to me what your viewpoint is. And my viewpoint on consent decrees is that it can be a very effective tool. It has traditionally been done the wrong way. There's some things missing from it. And so I want to make sure when we get ours, it's done the right way so that it can be effective. So that if I walk out of here and get hit by a bus, that whoever takes my spot has a clear pathway for understanding where this department in this city needs to go. It can't be about me. That's the whole point. It can't be about who is sitting in this chair. And unfortunately, leadership is always going to matter, but when it comes to a consent decree, it has to be clear and understandable to you and to the police department so that we know where we're going and how we're going to get there.
Well, on behalf of our moderator, Pastor Robert Drake, on behalf of our second vice moderator, we just want to say thank you for taking the time. I hope this has been beneficial to everyone. I hope it's been helpful. As I said, we tried to cover as many topics as possible, and as the police chief said, he'll be back at the annual session, and we'll run this back again one more time. So thank you so much. Moderator, anything you want to add at this time? Can we just give our police chief a hand? Thank you. I really appreciate it. Thank you. Let me close this out in prayer. Let me close out in prayer, then we'll have some quick announcements. Father, we just want to thank you once again for allowing us to be here. We want to thank you, dear God, for our police chief and his staff, dear God. We pray, dear God, that you would lead, God, and direct them so that they might serve the community and that we might work in partnership with them, dear God. We thank you for this moment, and we thank you for all that you do. For it is in Christ's name we pray. Amen. At this time, I believe we're going to